Lisa Daly and Lori Goodwin are the Recovering Preacher's Kids. Sit back and relax as they have an unfiltered conversation. Because let's face it, somebody's just got to say it. Well, welcome back to the Recovering Preacher's Kids. Thank you so much for joining us today as we discuss a topic that Christians don't want to talk about. And that topic is, don't y'all know the secret that Christians don't tell lies? I mean, that's the biggest lie of all, is it not? The biggest lie of all. So I recently have found myself in a situation where God has been like, hey, Lori, guess what? That's not true. And it's not that I am an untrustworthy person. It's not that you can't trust anything that I tell you. But I can also hold in the same hand that I will also take a Snicker bar wrapper, hide it in the bottom of the garbage can, and lie and tell you I did not eat it and have chocolate on my face.
That is
okay?
Me too.
So
that is me too.
But I'm coming to learn that, I compartmentalize lies. Like an example is if you ask me how I'm doing, I'm like, oh, I'm good, girl. How are you? When literally I'm struggling. Like I can't put one foot in front of the other. And I understand we can't go around and be telling, grumbling about everything all the time. But at the same time, I'm lying when I say that. But in my mind, that's not a lie. But, if I'm at work and I make a mistake and I lied and said, no, I didn't do that. Well, that's a lie. And I'll feel guilty about that. So I have decided there are different levels of lying, which then I'm like, okay, Lori, so have you decided there's different levels to sin? And then I have the realization that I lie to myself. I create stories in my head of what people think and the kind of people that they are. And then when they don't act the way I want them to act, I become angry at them and they don't understand why. But it's because I lied to myself about them as a person or maybe about a situation. And so I was like, I know that the Bible tells me that everything that's done in the dark comes to light. And God said, hey, there's more stuff in the Bible about that than just that one little verse. And so I thought I would kind of share with y'all some of the things I found. I had to write them down because me and the Lord, we're still working on them. But y'all, if you go to Leviticus 19, it says, you shall not lie to one another. And I'm like, okay, God, but that was like the law. That was like Leviticus. Yeah. And so then I went to Proverbs 6, and it says there are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, and hey, number 2 is a lying tongue. And then when you get down, it says a false witness who breathes out lies. Okay, so then if you keep going in Proverbs, it says lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. And I was like, I'd like to move on from that. And in Colossians, it says, do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices. And then in Luke, it just says, Luke, for nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be made known come to light. And so I'm going to use this podcast today as a therapy session that I'm a big fat liar. I'm a big fat liar. More than what I wanted to admit, because I want to say that I'm not a liar because, I'm a believer and a follower of Christ. And so I don't lie, but y'all, I do. When I lie to myself, I lie to myself.
You're not alone in that.
That's probably a podcast for another day.
We'll just add another episode to the end of this one. Is that what you need us to do for you? But if it makes you feel better, you're not alone in it. I mean, we all do. As I was sharing with you earlier, I mean, I'm the same way. Somebody asked me, how you doing? I'm doing great. Everything's fine. I'm doing wonderful. When I'm not. you know, or yeah, I can remember, just as I walked off just a few minutes ago and come back, I was like, I got an example. It's not really that I lie, but it's like John and I had a conversation not too long ago, and we were discussing finances and stuff, and because I stress over finances, and and he goes, when I say let's go do X, Y, and Z, or let's buy whatever, and you just say, sure, let's do that. He goes, I take it we're okay in the checkbook area. He goes, you need to tell me if we're not. So I'm not being honest when I'm like, okay, because then all I do is then I stress over how am I going to take care of it? Which Peter am I going to rob to pay Paul here? And it's like, you've got to tell me. Therefore, I lie. I'm not honest. And that's something that I would say, no, I don't purposely lie, but I'm not honest in everything I say or when I answer a question. So, you're not alone.
Girl, can I tell you how many times we have ordered DoorDash and I have put it on a credit card for my husband to be like, "Do we have the money for that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we did." In the checking account. Yeah. I mean, because at some point it's going to come out the checking account to pay the credit card bill. Do you see? Do you see? That's not what he was asking me. So therefore, I lied just like you.
I mean, it's
What
just
is
see, it's we all do. We all do. And that's what we're here to discuss today is that we I guess God knows our hearts. So we first don't need to lie about that. He already knows.
But why do we? Why don't we talk about this as Christians? Because, when you think about it, Adam and Eve did not have to be taught how to lie. Okay. She ate the fruit. And let's get real. She ate the fruit and then she gave it to him. Okay. That we always miss the fact that that's where the sin happens when Adam ate the fruit, but I digress. But they just, it was a sin nature that they just knew how to lie. They weren't taught that. Do you know what I'm saying? God had to basically teach them how to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things, as you and I were talking earlier, that like, y'all, my grandkids are 7, 4, 3, fixing to be 3 and 1. And I'm going to tell you, that little 3-year-old, she can come up with some stories, she's got things to say. And so it's like, none of my grandkids have ever had to be taught how to lie, but like you said, they've had to be taught how to be honest.
Right. We have to be taught to
And
be honest.
why, as believers, are we not honest about this? Why? Because, it's almost like we believe that, oh, you just accept Christ and you become a follower of Christ and boom, all your problems are solved. And, you just have it all figured out. You're never going to lie again. You're never going to curse again. You know what I'm saying? Like, even as a preacher's daughter, there was a part of me that thought that these things would just be gone. And like, we don't take a class where we sit down and they're like, hey, newsflash. You're still going to struggle with this stuff, right, but nobody wants to talk about it.
Right. No, it's just, and I guess some of it too is then growing up in the 80s and I guess the way things, I don't even know the word I'm looking for. You remember revivals and stuff. I know some churches still have revivals, but in the 80s revivals were really, really big. And you go in there and I always felt like I didn't measure up because from the sermons, and most of the time it was because I was being told I wouldn't be, if you were a Christian, then you wouldn't be lying, you wouldn't be doing this, you wouldn't be doing, so it was still a checklist to me. But going back to, it wasn't the fact that I intentionally was lying, but I was intentionally leaving information out.
Ooh,
to make me look good or to make things not as bad or not to get into trouble or to create trouble or, just minimize whatever happened so there wouldn't be any chaos. But it's still lying. or is not being completely honest. So yeah, this is an interesting topic to talk about because we don't want to talk about it as Christians because we all want to say, "Oh, we're honest. We're
Yeah.
honest. We don't
But
tell lies."
we compartmentalize it all. We
Yes.
sit in judgment and decide what's a lie and what's not a lie, and what's a sin and what's not a sin. And not only do I do it for myself, I can also judge you and let you know if you know
If-
you need to ask for forgiveness for that or not. Which I laugh about it, but I realize now this is something that I'm embarrassed to say that I'm beginning to see as an issue for me. And, and it's not the big things that I lie about. It's really the small, insignificant things.
yeah, yeah,
Or really, I guess, like, number one, I don't want to disappoint you. The thought
yeah,
of disappointing a person makes me want to vomit. But at
yes,
the end of the day, I have decided in my mind what I think you expect from me. You've never told me that's what you expect from me, but I've decided this is what you expect from me. I'm not living up to your expectations, so therefore I'll lie because I want you to be pleased with me. I want you to be my friend. I want you to like me.
right,
I
yes,
don't want the conflict. Then on the other side of it, what I see is I also do it because I'm scared that someone's going to have like a visceral reaction. What if this
mhm,
is like anger? I'm met with this big explosive anger and this big emotion from someone that I don't know how to handle.
yeah,
And so it's
yeah,
easier for me. Or maybe there is a confrontation and I'm feeling out of control and I'm feeling unsafe, and so therefore I would lie just to kind of like make it stop. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah,
kind of ease the situation. But at the end of the day, I'm realizing, well, even in doing all of those things, I'm not trusting God. I'm not trusting God that, if that person is disappointed, maybe not maybe he's hearing conversations I'm not a part of. So he knows if that person should be in my life or not. So I'm not trusting that he's going to keep the right people in my life and remove people that need to be removed. I'm not trusting God that in an unsafe situation, he's going to take care of me. Physically, he would take care of me.
Who does this sound like? We just did an episode on last season on a man named Abram who told his wife Sarai to lie twice to say she was his sister because they were going one time was Egypt, was
What?
that right? Well, they were
Mm-hmm.
going to two, as like two kings or whatever because he was afraid that they would kill him. So exactly what you were talking about. He didn't trust, even though God told him, leave and I'm going to bring you into the promised land and give this land to your descendants. He lied twice. And then we have Jacob, who his name meant deceiver,
Deceiver.
and he lied to his father and said he was Esau to get his birthright. And he went as far as dressing up on the urge of his mom. I mean, his mom's the one that said, "Hey, go in there and pretend to be Esau, and this is what we're going to do." Because I don't know, because like you were saying, they didn't trust that God was going to take care of them. But in the end,
Wow.
God took that lying and used it for their good. Not saying I'm not condoning lying. I'm not sitting here saying lie and God's gonna make it all right. But he when we realize that we've done wrong and confess it, but he can use
It,
that for good.
and don't you find it interesting? Like, I think about, as you were talking, David was in my mind and all the lies that David told
Mm,
after his, rendezvous with Bathsheba.
Bathsheba.
And I was thinking about how David got to a point where David was honest with God and was like, I did this. He never said, no, I didn't. And I'm thinking, wow, he's a man after God's own heart. And maybe that's where God is kind of stirring my heart right now is not only am I not honest with others, not only am I not honest with myself, but the reality and the root for me is I'm not honest with God.
Yeah. Which is a very thought-provoking kind of a crazy thing because he's all-knowing, so he already knows. That's one of those things. It's like you already know. It's like, okay, like my kids. There was a situation, it happened with all four of mine, and evidently somebody, all growing up, somebody was telling a story, a lie. And, like we said, it's just part of growing up. We have to teach them to be honest, and anyway, the last one, our youngest one, John William, there was a situation that, well, I'll just tell the story. I'm sure we've told it to other people and he's laughed about it to himself. But I was called by this other child's mother to let me know that they had found a vape in their vehicle, and their child sung like a bird and told the other ones that were in the truck with him and who all was vaping with him. And John William was one of the ones. So, of course, I get home and I start asking questions, and trying to get him to say the truth, and I'm telling you, he had a good story. It was not him. He was in the vehicle and everybody else was, but he was not. Of course, I knew the truth. I'm like, okay. Well, then, of course, a little later on, his father got involved, and of course, I guess a little different tone of voice. He ended up breaking down and being honest with Dad asking him. But the funny part where I was getting at is when it come out and his siblings were hearing about it, his oldest sister looked at him and just shook her head, and she said, "Trust me, if Mom and Dad are asking you a question, you can pretty much bet they already know. So there's no need in lying to them. Just tell them the truth. They know it." So all that to say, I can equate it. God already knows the truth. And what he's doing to you right now is, and me too, is asking you those questions. He already knows. He's asking you these questions so you're honest with yourself. So therefore you're honest with him. And it hurts. And it hurts.
Does hurt. And it's hard. And it's interesting to me that at 15 years old that, I'm like, you would think that these would be things that I would have dealt with when I was younger, or that, you know what I'm saying? And I think that something else too is the lie that we tell ourselves is that this shouldn't be an issue. Like, come on, you're 50, you're 45, you're 30, you're 70, whatever. But the truth of the matter is, it's just a struggle. And I wish in our churches and in our small groups that we got to where we talked about these things.
Yeah.
Where it was an open conversation, because I do feel very alone in the crazy that I feel. And, hence the podcast, because it's my own little therapy session. Y'all are just along for the ride. But it's like, I feel very alone, and it's very comforting when we get messages from people that are like, hey, I feel that way too. I'm glad to hear somebody else say it. And I'm like, well, girl, trust me, sit by me long enough. I'm going to say it. We're going to talk about it. But I wish that I understood more about putting everything in little boxes in my mind, and, how to combat that as a believer, to not, number sin, to not, oh, well, that's a 5, that we need to confess that, but that's a 1, so I'm not going to worry about that one. Do you see what I'm saying? And I don't really know what the answer is, because sin is sin. Sin is sin, and there is no grading to it. But in our human minds, we want to grade it because it makes us feel better.
Well, it's like in everything we say, well, I know I've messed up, but I'm not as bad as so and so over there. I've heard that's hold or I don't do what so and so does, so I'm not as bad as
Yeah.
them. So we all have the struggle, and I think probably a lot of well, answering your question, let me just go back to your first question of why don't we talk about it more in our small groups, and I think some of it might be the fact that I'm just this just came to me is I think we're afraid to be honest because we're supposed to have the Sunday school answer. And then, especially if
Mhm.
you're teaching or you're leading, you don't want to admit that you messed up by telling a lie or not being honest. I mean, I'm just being honest here. I mean, when
True.
I'm in a role of teaching or leader, I don't want to admit that, well, I just told a lie to so and so, you know? So I guess it is something that's a little hard because we try to put that we've got it together facade. So that's probably one reason we don't talk about it in church, along with other things. And then, second, the biggest liar that we're dealing with right now is when you look at social media. I mean, you don't see
Filters.
truth. Yeah, you do
Mm-mm.
not see truth most of the time. What we're gonna say, 99% of the time, it is always going to have a twist to it. I mean, you look at
Mhm.
um, politics right now and the journalism, there's just a little bit of the truth in there somewhere, but it's going to be twisted in order to suit whose ever purpose that is stating it or retweeting it or reposting it or whatever. And most of the time, if we get down to it, and I'm going to be honest here, and because I've done it, it comes down to our agenda. I think it comes down to what is our agenda. And
Ooh.
if our agenda is one thing, I'm gonna and I've done it. I'm gonna do whatever I have to do to make sure my agenda goes forward and everything is okay. And a case in point that one of the big while you were talking, that a story that came to life or brought to life to me front to the forefront was when I was working at the bank, and one of the regulations that we had to deal with was like, okay, when you call and say, I didn't make this transaction on my debit card, and you come in and we have to do a dispute. It's called a Reg E, and we have to open and do this whole case. Okay, well, there's time frames. We have certain time. We listen. I'm saying we, and I don't even work at the bank anymore. But there was time frames. There were deadlines, and if you did not do certain things within this time frame, then you were when the auditors came or and the examiners, you were out of compliance and you could be written up, and some things could even be fined if they could
Oh,
find
wow.
a pattern. So we had one of these cases, and the girl came to me and we were looking over it. And I mean, and it was one of these things that dropped through the crack. And we were like a day or so late. And my response was right off, just backdate it and put it in the mail. Just backdate it, make a copy. Let's go with it. I'll sign it and let's go. And went on about a business and got home and got to thinking about it and got my quiet time. And it was like to me, Lisa, you as a leader at your business told your subordinate to lie. You told them
Ooh.
to lie.
That's a number 8 on my scale.
So of course I went in the next morning, and this was hard. This was a very hard thing for me. Um I went in and I sat down at their desk and I told them exactly what I came to realize, that I put them in a position and told them to lie, and I was wrong. And I would love to tell you right now that I told them to go back and change the date, but I can't. Honestly, I do not remember what I said. I don't know if I said, let's be honest and let's make a note. I don't know. But I did say I was wrong in telling you to lie. And I told you to lie
Mhm.
because I didn't want us to get in trouble. And that bottom line is a lot of my agenda was we weren't going to get written up for this.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to let them find this. We're not going to let them see our mistake. That was my agenda. So I think that's what it comes down to when we're not really honest or we're telling little lies, what we call white lies or big lies. It comes down to our own agenda. Our own agenda.
I've never thought about it that way. I've never thought about even in lying to myself, you know, I do. I have an agenda of what, or cracking a joke to cover something up,
Yeah.
making light of what I did. And I'm not saying we should go through life, with these scarlet letters on our chest. Like I don't, and I know that, but at the same time, I think that there is a level of honesty as believers that we are to carry with us, because we're supposed to be set apart from the world. And it and we don't talk about it.
Let me see where this was. I was reading it just today. And I remember going to church with my kids a few weeks ago to Three Circle, and Chris Bell was doing a series on um, questions questions asked to Jesus or something like that. I can't remember the
Hmm.
exact, but it was about questions. And anyway, it was about on judging. And
Okay.
we have thrown at us several times, well, you're not supposed to judge, and I know this is a podcast for another day. But he brought out the whole, it's in Matthew because I read it today. Matthew 7 about, oh, well, I guess it's really just starting back all the way. Anyway, talking about where Jesus says, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and you got this big log in yours?
Yes.
Okay. And I think we're afraid to bring these things up. And one of his biggest points was that we need to have more judging or judge. I need to be careful how I put this, but I guess you can put it to accountability in church. And this might be in lying is a good accountability, is where we say, Lori, look, I see the speck of not being honest going on in your life, and I've seen like you're covering up. You're saying you're fine, but you're not really not fine. I really can tell something's going on. To not to
So
make you, but it's also, I think it's on our other part is to be able to say, are you really being honest with yourself about this? I'm here for you. And we don't do that, I don't think, sometimes in our churches because we're supposed to show that we've got it all together.
so what I'm hearing you say is that we are to love others so well that love ourselves and be in tune, that when the Holy Spirit pricks us and says, hey, she says she's good but she's not, that we love others so well and we're obedient, that we're like, hey, are you sure? If you don't want to
Yeah.
talk about it, you don't have to, but just know I got you, girl, and I'm praying for you, and
Yep.
move on.
Yep.
Because we don't have to know everybody's trash and we don't have to say our trash, but it's okay at the same time to say, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say, I'm not good. I can't talk about it, but I'm not good, and it's okay to admit before the living God that you are not okay. And I think about
Right.
the prodigal son and how he got to a point that he said, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm not doing well. And as he was walking towards his father, the father was running to him. And so I just kind of have this image of maybe we're in a season of where we're walking down the road towards the living God saying, I'm not okay. And he's like, I know, I've been waiting on you to get here every day. I just keep waiting on you to get here. And,
Yeah.
um, because he's the God that knows all, sees all, and he just wants us to be honest with ourselves, but to be
Yeah.
honest with him.
Right. Yep. And, you know, and the other big point he made out of that too is what you were saying, as far as what you were hearing me say, that we need to love each other so much that we could see it. Is also what he spoke to me about too, was that, you know, you're humble with it by saying, I can see you're not being honest because I do the same thing.
Mm.
I tell people I'm fine when I'm not, because I don't want to share my troubles. And like you were just saying, I mean, God's waiting there for us to say, I'm not okay, or I'm having a hard time dealing with this, or this is going on, or I'm telling me this story in my head about this person, you know?
Maybe the fact that we are in a position right now of talking about all the things that nobody wants to talk about, you know, maybe it's plausible that that our eyes are being opened to our own things, not in a God is bashing us kind of way, but
Yeah.
more in a way of a father that is just trying to refine us for what he has down the road. And, you know, I saw on social media not too long ago, it said something about God sits at tables that we don't sit at, you know, and that's so true because he sees all and he's a million dimensional God and we're literally a one dimensional race of people. And so I think the fact of admitting that, hey, I lie about things, my agenda is I really don't trust God.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really don't trust what he's doing here. And so I want to be in control. And so the root of my sin is really lack of trust, not the words on my tongue. Thank you for joining us today. Be sure and like, follow, and subscribe. And also check us out at therecoveringpreacherskids.com.